So today is a day that many streams of the Christian church take and set aside to celebrate the life of St. Augustine of Hippo. The city in Florida, we say St. Augustine, but most people will say that the name of the person is Augustine. Augustine was a Christian pastor, a bishop, in the late 4th and early 5th century, in the late 300s, early 400s, in a relatively obscure African seaport city of Hippo. And Augustine was born into a home that was bicultural. So his father was Roman and his mother was North African, and his mother was a Christian, his father was not. And Augustine, there's a great little biography of Augustine called The Mestizo Augustine, a Theologian Between Two Cultures by Justo Gonzalez. That might be a great place for you to start as an introduction to the life and teaching of Augustine. And Gonzalez, what's kind of unique about that biography is the way he shows how Augustine's bicultural heritage, or what's called mestizo in Latin theology, some streams of Latin theology, really shaped Augustine's responses and theological vision in so many ways. But Augustine was born in 354 AD and grew up in this home that was had Christian influence but also pagan influence. And Augustine ended up just wanting to be a happy and successful intellectual, influential person, and ended up just sort of living a life looking for pleasure and trying to make a name for himself and trying all sorts of different philosophies, much to the heartbreak of his mother, Monica, who prayed fervently and just pled with God and with Augustine himself for Augustine to turn to Christ. And eventually, after going from his North African home into the more major city of Carthage and then to Rome, and then to Milan, he ends up encountering the true and living God. And there's a long story of how he got there. The best place to find out about that story is in Augustine's own autobiography called The Confessions. That's where everyone would recommend you start if you're looking to get into Augustine. It's very engaging and readable, and just a great place to start for you if you're looking to learn about Augustine. So I would say Gonzalez, and then as a secondary source, and then the Confessions, and in there he explains how God just grabbed a hold of his heart, and God grabbed a hold of his heart, and then several years later, after losing his mom and his son, God called him into ministry, and he was taken into the church in the city of Hippo, relatively obscure town near his home in Thagaste. I don't actually know if I'm saying that correctly, but Hippo was the town where Augustine was called into ministry and where he ended up serving as a bishop for decades, for over 30 years. And what really I resonate with about Augustine, and I'm obviously not in any way of the level and the stature of intellect that Augustine was. He's one of the greatest theologians, maybe the greatest theologian in the history of the Christian church, and one of the most brilliant men who ever lived. But what really resonates with me about Augustine is the way he did theology in the context of a local church community. And I think that's what I'm called to do and what many of us are called to do. And he wrote his Confessions. Like I said, that's a great place to start. If you're looking for something a little more advanced, a secondary source would be the biography of Augustine by Peter Brown. It's kind of the standard. It's a really, really wonderful biography. And I haven't read James K. Smith's On the Road with St. Augustine. I've heard great things, so I can't officially recommend that, although I'm sure it's very good. And then Confessions. And then a few of his more advanced and longer works are his City of God, which is his philosophy and theology of history, and he envisions the city of man and the city of God in sort of this intertwined, quasi-competitive, really complex relation, starting with the murder of Abel by his brother Cain, and he sort of says that that the founder of the city of God was Abel, and the founder of the city of man was Cain, and that develops through the ages up until the present day. Another really good place to start would be in his little book called De Doctrina Christiana, or on Christian teaching. And the first book of that is just a really beautiful explanation of what it means to truly love God and to rightly order our loves. And one of my favorites of his books is his work on the Trinity, or in Latin, De Trinitate. It's been extremely influential in the church in general, and really formative for me theologically, as he wrestles with how God can be one God in three persons, a Father who generates his Son, and who together, from whom together proceeds, or they spirate the Spirit. And that's a really, really important and wonderful work of theology. And it's incredible to think that he wrote these things while he was pastoring a church, while he was a bishop in a local church. And so aside from his theological treatises, one of the things I love most about Augustine, and if you ask our church, they would say they're probably a little sick of, is me citing and quoting his tractates or his sermons on the Gospel of John. Because Augustine wasn't just a theologian, he was a pastor. He was a pastor theologian. And so I would encourage you to read those theological treatises, but also those commentaries, especially if you're a pastor, to if you're some of his major works are in Genesis, in Psalms, and in John, the Gospel of John. But he's written many sermons that Augustine preached to his people. And you can see there his pastoral heart, how he does applies deep theological truth to the lives of people. And you just see there the side of Augustine that I think often we don't think about in terms of a theologian, and that is someone who's just embedded in the local church. And so I just want to encourage you to take a moment today to spend some time getting to know Augustine and thanking God for his life. I think some people overly venerate him, and I'm not into that, like veneration of saints stuff per se, but I think we can give God thanks for him and for his life and for his work. I'm profoundly grateful for the life and the work of St. Augustine. He was a flawed man. He was a sinful man. We see that the way he dealt with certain controversies. There was most notably the Donatist controversy and the Pelagian controversy. The Donatists were kind of a splinter group of Christians, and he didn't always deal with them the best. And some of the ways he approached that had some problems. And then the Pelagians, they were a group of Christians who, and a teacher named Pelagius, who said that by our own free will we can perfectly obey God. And Augustine just was too in touch with the reality of his own sinful heart and his own sinful past, and with the truth of the Scripture, to let that go. And so he kind of waged almost a one-man battle against Pelagian theology and battled for the truth of God's grace. And I'm profoundly grateful for that. And that's why many call him the doctor of grace, because he understood God's grace and he fought for the truth of God's grace in the church. And so he was a great man, not without his flaws. And I just want to encourage you to give God thanks for his life and his work, to look into his work. Start with one of those books, maybe the Gonzalez biography and the Confessions, and I encourage you to plow through and plug away at that, and it will bless your heart. And I'm looking forward to meeting Augustine in heaven. I'm sure there will be a long line to get to meet him.